sun is shining, not a cloud in the sky. What a beautiful day. The birds are singing and so am I. What a beautiful day. I'd like to keep this moment for the rest of my life, but I know there'll always be a little toil and strife. What a beautiful day, such a beautiful day. Hi there, and welcome to The Guilty Knitter. I'm Vivian, and for all you other guilty knitters out there who are supposed to be doing other things, this is your place. Come on down, bring your knitting, and just relax and let me talk to you about my knitting and my finished object, which I have one of this week, which is kind of fun. I don't always have something to show you, but or at least I don't have a finished object all that often to show you. So it's fun to have something. And I'm going to talk to you about my current work in progress, L'Anzolu by Jennifer Beal. I've actually made some progress, so I'm going to talk to you about that. And I don't know, a couple of whatever comes up, I guess. This won't be a terribly long episode, I don't think. If you want to find me on Instagram, I am over there as @GuiltyKnitter, and on Ravelry, I'm The Guilty Knitter, The Guilty Knitter, all one word. And I do have a page for the podcast over on Ravelry, but there's not much going on. You can always check it out, and I would love it if you would introduce yourself and ask any questions you like. You can also ask questions down below in the comments section. And if you like the episode, please subscribe and also press the bell next to the subscribe button, because that'll give you the option for notifications so you don't miss an episode. I wanted to mention that I did a recent episode on purling, which of course is one of my, if you've watched my episodes before, I often mention my struggle with purling over the years. It's never been my favorite part of knitting, and so I'm on an ongoing quest to find the perfect purling method. So anyway, I did a technique video of 5 different purling methods. So I'll put a card up about that one in case you're interested. Okay, so I guess let's get started. This is my finished object. It is the Ziggurat method sweater. Now there's another name for this particular model, and I don't remember what it is because it's got a very complicated name, which I'm going to put right there on the screen so you can check that out. Although I'm not sure if this is readily available on Ravelry, but the Ziggurat pattern or the method is there in a bunch of different sweaters. This I got through being a member of Knit Stars. I own I guess it's the 5th season that Asa Soderman, who also goes by Asa Tricosa, she did a whole episode on the Ziggurat method, and so I know I've talked to you about this before, but I'll show it to you in a little bit greater detail because I have the whole thing to show you. What you do is you start with the neck part, because it's all knit in one piece, well, except for the sleeves, which you add, of course. But you start at the very top here, not counting the little ribbing at the back, but you do the ribbing at the front at the same time. So you start, I forget which side, but I guess you start on this side and then you work all the way around until you've got this little piece here in the shoulders, and then it's kind of magical because you end up with these lovely set-in sleeves, and yet you don't have to cut the yarn at all. So it's quite nice. It's a quite interesting system if you want to try it. And a lot of her sweaters are pretty, they're plain, I would say. They're straight ahead. She likes to work with pretty simple designs, but she also likes to add little variations, little nuance, I guess you could say, little details. Like, for instance, at the very back of this sweater, there's just a tiny little gather there. And it's just very subtle, but it's cute, and it adds a little bit of flair in the back of the sweater. And as she says, she likes having more fabric at the back of her sweaters because she says she has a large bottom she likes to cover up. But I don't know if that's particularly true, but she seems to think so. And also, what else did I... Oh yeah, there's the detail on the sleeve, which is I think you can see that. There's like a little keyhole there. And that was a little bit complicated, but you obviously don't have to do that. You could just go straight and do a normal cuff. But I thought that looked really cool. So I did it, and this particular sweater, and she does do an adult version of this, which I'm pretty sure is on Ravelry or something very similar. But she doesn't put buttonholes, but I put buttonholes because I thought it might be handy for a baby sweater to have buttonholes. And so yeah, it's all ready. I just have to find some buttons. And oh yeah, the yarn is Cascade Heritage Wave, and it certainly has a very long wave of color changes. And by the end of it, your yarn is pretty much gray, and you can see that this is the gray that I added at the very end. I quite like that effect. But yeah, so it starts off quite red at the very top, which I guess is this part. It would be the beginning, and then so it has a little bit of gray in there, I guess, at the very beginning, and then it goes almost completely red here. Gets a little more gray. It's almost like I've been fading it, but it did it by itself. And then, of course, you can see where I added the sleeves, and they're not exactly the same color. But I don't know. I think I kind of like the overall effect. And I'm sure the baby will enjoy it. Pretty excited to have my first grandchild to welcome into the world, despite the fact that this world is a crazy place and maybe not the best right now. But anyway, certainly having a baby in our lives will make things seem a lot more fun. I'm also getting a puppy in 6 weeks, which is kind of crazy. This is something that came up very much at the last minute, because I was not expecting. You probably know that I lost my dog in December. He was about 14 or 15 years old, Monty. And since then, I've been kind of really missing having a dog and specifically having Monty, of course. But it's just so quiet and lonely without the dog, even though I have a husband who keeps me company. But yeah, I've really been missing that. So a friend of mine, Nyla, hi Nyla, if you're watching, she's a knitter as well. She just last summer adopted a Boston Terrier, and she just can't talk she can't talk high enough about this little dog. Her name is Madame Jazz. So I got the name of the breeder from her, and I sent him a message, and he actually offered me a puppy that had just been born like 10 days before, because he said it was available, and so I thought, okay, well, I guess we're going for it. And I guess ever since then I've been feeling a lot better. I was having really emotional ups and downs, and I think it has a lot to do with grieving, but yeah, it's been a bit tricky, but I've been feeling quite a bit better since making that decision. And I know it's going to be challenging to have a puppy, because we've always, except for one time, we've pretty much always adopted adult dogs. But yeah, so this will be quite a challenge, but I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait. Can't wait to see the little puppy. Maybe I'll insert a picture of a Boston Terrier in here, or even of this particular Boston Terrier. Um, yeah, so that's pretty fun. So that's some news. And I'm planning on, well, I guess I'll have to be knitting more dog sweaters in my future. Yay. Oh, and by the way, I actually cut my own hair today. I just thought, what the hell, right? I mean, I couldn't stand it anymore. And I didn't take off very much, so hopefully it doesn't look terrible. But just a little bit, and it helps. Then Dave told me, oh, well, salons are opening up now. So I was like, oh, okay, well, I didn't know that. And so whatever, I can always go in and have them fix it for me if I can't stand it anymore. But I think it's okay. I don't know if, do you ever find it's funny that as you get older, I mean, I'm 60, so I feel like I'm sort of past the age where I'm too worried about putting a lot of makeup or stuff. But I do use this stuff mostly just when I'm recording. I use this Boom, it's called Boom by Cindy Joseph. And it's just like a little bit of lipstick. I know this is probably not interesting for most of you, but and you put it on your lips, and you can also use it as a blush. So this is about all I use anymore, and it's pretty rare. So anyway, I was just thinking about how I have these young nieces. They're in their 30s, and my daughter, of course, too. But they're a lot more concerned about getting all dolled up and doing the makeup thing and everything than I am now. And I certainly understand, because at the time I was doing the same thing. Right, well, it's been quite an adventure, gang, trying to get this episode up and running. Yeah, on Wednesday, which would have been 2 seconds ago in your timeline, I was recording and got interrupted. And then I tried again a couple more times and had some technical difficulties, so I had to just put it away. Okay. So yeah, I had technical difficulties, mostly with my the app that I'm using with my new lapel mic, which I'm really excited about because it'll cut down a lot on ambient noise and things like that. So it's going to help, I hope, to keep the sound consistent and good. And so that's fine. But anyway, and then yesterday I tried again. Again, I had trouble, and I got frustrated and gave it up. So that explains why I'm not wearing the same outfit as I was before. This is my Zweig by Caitlin Hunter. One of my favorite things I ever knit. It's a lot of fun. I only recently found out who this guy Zweig was. I just finished reading a book by him called The World of Yesterday. Highly recommend it. A wonderful historic look at, a memoir, but it's kind of a history book too of the period before the First World War till during the Second World War. Anyway, he had quite an interesting life. Highly, highly recommend it. But anyway, so that was the guy Zweig that she named this sweater after, of all things. Anyway, that's just a little side note. I was talking to you about, I got interrupted right around when I was talking about my my observations about how when you're young, you try so hard to improve your looks and maximize how great you look, and yet you're at your most beautiful pretty much in your 20s or even earlier, and now that I'm 60, I can't be bothered. So I just find it kind of ironic. Well, this is at 60 you could really use some help, I suppose, but I just can't do it. And end up cutting your own hair. Anyway, so that's funny. I just find that amusing. And so, okay, so on to the next thing. I'm going to talk about my works in progress. Which I have one main one, and it's my Lance Olu by Jennifer Beal, and it's a beautiful sweater, and it's made. The one good thing about having had to wait 2 more days to get this finished is that I actually made some more progress on my on this project, and I can have a little bit more to show you than I would have on Wednesday. Today's Friday the 5th of February, and so it's kind of an odd construction, as I've mentioned before, but basically, because it's all on one needle, it's a bit hard to picture this, but this is my neckline here, I believe. Yeah, this is your neckline, my neckline, and it goes up to the shoulders, and these little bands here, which are a couple inches wide, I guess, they go down the shoulder, comme ça, and comme ça, right? So you knit these bands first, and you knit them in the round, and then you steek them. So you've got these two bands, one goes up one arm, one goes down the other arm, and I'm basically right now knitting short rows that kind of start up here, and you knit them do back and forth, then you do the other side do back and forth, and then you add them together eventually, so that you start knitting like down towards your elbow, which is kind of where it stops, like around here. So you keep on knitting back and forth, these long short rows, and then eventually you get this shape, which is the front of the sweater and the sleeves. So you're kind of knitting the dolman sleeves at the same time as you're knitting your sweater, the front. So it's pretty nifty, actually. It's a cool way of knitting a sweater. Anyway, so I'm pretty excited about it. I'm okay. I've had a couple of issues. One is my gauge, because I did my gauge in the round. Beautiful gauge swatch that I did in the round here. And the gauge was always too tight, but I kind of thought, oh, I'm just gonna pick a size that more or less corresponds with the dimensions I would get with that gauge. And anyway, so I just went ahead and started it, and as it turns out, the gauge I'm getting now is closer to the pattern gauge. So this could end up being a little bit big for me, but I actually don't think that'll be a problem. It's basically a kind of oversized sweater, not oversized, but it's a generous sweater, except that it comes down a little bit at the waist and kind of pulls in a little bit here, but that I can kind of fudge when I get there. I was really nervous about starting this, because I thought if at any point I don't get the right, like if I'm way off on my gauge, it's going to be a big problem. But in the end, I don't actually think so. So anyway, so I'm getting close to gauge right now. The other thing is that in the short rows, I'm learning this new way of doing short rows called Sunday short rows, and it's easy, and it reminds me a lot of, I believe it's very similar to Japanese short rows, and eventually I will try Japanese short rows, and then I'll be sure what I'm talking about, but they seem very similar, and the one thing that's great about both methods is it's practically invisible. So, but the only problem is I have trouble keeping track of where I am, like how many short rows I've done and that kind of thing. So I know you're supposed to keep track of these things, like with a little counter, but I don't trust myself to do that. Normally I don't use counters. I just count my rows usually, and I figure things out that way, or if it's increases, I can usually tell where I've increased, and I just count the increases. So I just don't tend to keep track very well on a sort of, row by row basis. So for this, I really had to try to figure out where I should be, especially in the first part of the short row section where it was a little bit, anyway, I don't even want to go into it because it's kind of boring, but the point is that I wish I were different in that sense, because if I were just, I could really just keep track, everything would be great, and all would be fine. And I'm just checking to make sure my my voice memo is still working, because I'm trying to get good sound here. There we go, it's working. So yeah, I have no idea. I wish I could be different in that way, but for some reason I just don't trust myself, and for good reason, because I often don't remember to press that button. So okay, so that's one issue, but I've managed to. Oh, and the other thing is that this requires you to lay a piece of string. This is how this short row method works. You lay a piece of string to mark your spot where you've turned, or where you've turned, and it helps you pick up the little loop you need to close up the short row on the next row. And and a couple of times I've forgotten to put the yarn, or it has gotten pulled out by accident. So that's been annoying. And there was at least one spot where I did it. I guess I did the short row a little bit weird, because there's kind of a hole there. Anyway, but I just don't think I want to go back. These are big rows. These are 200 plus rows, 200 plus stitch rows. So anything I can do to avoid going back and knitting them again, I am going to do. The other thing, of course, as my ongoing challenge with purling, which I may have mentioned in the first half of this video, but I'm going to mention it again. I just realized that, especially when it comes to something like this, the short rows, because you start with a small, number, and then you keep going, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger, longer and longer. The very beginning little part, I was just knitting backwards when I had to go onto the wrong side, because it's so much easier than turning every, after 3 stitches or 5 stitches or whatever it is. So that's what I was doing for the first little wedge, and then I switched to, I don't even remember, I think it was flicking. So I flicked for a couple of rows. And then for these really long rows, I've been doing Portuguese purling. So of course, that kind of shows up a bit on my fabric, if you can see. There are some bumpy bits, and there's at least one spot where it looks like there's almost I don't know, maybe one loose row there. I don't know. Hopefully you can see that in the close-up, but yeah. Anyway, it's all very it's annoying. So yeah, I don't know. It's but I can't seem to help myself. Is what I just don't. I don't really think I have a default method of purling, which is kind of weird. I guess if I had one, it would be continental. But I usually, if I automatically start knitting continental, I tend to just end up switching to something else, because I just can't. I don't really like continental purling for a long row. I might do like 10 stitches and then go, oh yeah, I forgot I don't like this method, and switch to something else. Honestly, and it's exactly what I warned people against doing, because it's always a better idea to switch to keep to one method per project, because otherwise you're going to mess around with your gauge. But I'm hoping that it's not going to make a huge difference. Anyway, okay, so that's my Lonzolu, and after this part is finished, after the front is finished, I have to pick up along the back, the back of these, or the other side, like this whole part, pick up that and do basically the same thing as I'm doing now for the back. So this part of it is kind of long, these short rows and stuff, but it kind of does keep you going. It's just, makes it interesting, that the way that it's constructed. So, and after the back part is done, then I start the color work for the part that goes along here. I'll stick in a picture so that you can really see the way it looks. And so that's Jennifer Beal, and she's doing a year-long, practically year-long knit-along. If you're interested in her patterns, go on Ravelry and look them up. Yeah, so you can start anytime with even if you've already started a pattern by her, you could finish, you could get into it, get into the knit-along, or you could start one. She's got patterns of very varied types of knitting, and a lot of sometimes combining lace and color work like mine, like this one, sometimes more sticking to one or the other, but it's really kind of amazing what she does. I think I really admire her knitting and her designing. I'm going to tell you about Finish It February, which is something that Roxanne Richardson on YouTube does every February. So she pulls out her old UFOs, her unfinished objects, and finds the ones she wants to deal with this February. If there's more than she can handle in one February, then she just does a few. She either decides whether she's going to frog it or just keep it and not work on it anymore. She just likes to decide about things rather than leaving them kind of on her conscience, you know what I mean? And then some of them she'll finish. So I've decided to pick one of my UFOs, but I don't have that many, but I'm picking this one, which is an old scarf which made out of yarn that my son and his fiance gave me a couple of years ago. And it's very sort of bumpy yarn, and I'm doing this sort of crazy pattern, n'importe quoi, you know, any old thing that comes to mind, you know. Which is sort of, well, it is fun. It's really fun. I just maybe I think I may have sort of run out of juice at some point, and that's why I stopped. Like I got sort of stuck creatively. I didn't know what I wanted to do next. But I think I'm going to try and go back to that and finish that off. I mean, it's only two balls of yarn, and I think it could go by pretty quickly. So I'm going to do that. I got inspiration for that from so what I got inspiration for the idea of doing those kind of weird short rows from Vera Velomaki, because she did a Knit Stars segment, and her thing is stripes. She loves stripes, so she uses different ways of getting a striped fabric, you know, horizontally and vertically. So a lot of it is the way she gets horizontal stripes. No, I guess it would be, yeah, horizontal stripes. She uses short rows a lot. So yeah, it's really cool. I'm gonna keep working on that and go back and get a refresher from her from my Knit Stars. I think it was season 3 that she was in, if I'm not mistaken. That was a good season. So yeah, so that's that. I'm looking forward to getting that finished, but mostly I just want to work on my sweater. I'm really excited about that. I also am thinking of buying yarn to make a couple of pairs of hearth slippers, because those are so nice and mine are really falling apart. And that's by Diana Wall. I mentioned that in the last normal Guilty Knitter episode where I talked about mending. I can put a card up about that. Yeah, I did try mending those slippers, but then they're fraying again, and it's the bottom of the slipper because I used some yarn that was just 100% wool and didn't have any nylon in them, and that's just not a good idea for slippers because you know they're just not going to last. So so yeah, I think I'm going to knit myself another pair at some point. So I'm going to buy some Briggs and Little yarn because that stuff is really good, and their Tuffy yarn is really tough. Oh my gosh, it changed again. Is it because I keep moving? It's so funny. I don't know. I hope it's okay. Oh dear. Live and learn. I'm learning as I go with these podcasts, that's for sure. Technique are like these these electronic devices and everything that I've got going. I mean, what the heck, you know? Why not learn new things as you get older? All right, so what else have I got to talk about? Just a book recommendation. I've been reading this book, Move the Needle by Shelley Brander. Yeah, Shelley Brander. Move the Needle, Yarns by an Unlikely Entrepreneur. Yarns from an Unlikely Entrepreneur. Anyway, it's very interesting, and she's a good writer, so I highly recommend it. It's all about how she's the woman who started the Loops shop in Oklahoma, and I think maybe she has other stores around. I'm not sure. Her plan was, according to the book, her plan was to franchise, but I don't know if she really did. There's a Loops London, but I don't think they are related. Not sure though. She also started the Knit Stars program. So I was curious about the book when she first started vlogging it, and I thought, oh, what the heck. And I do really like it. It's on the New York Times bestseller list. It's done really, really well. I guess there are a lot of knitters out there, and there are a lot of entrepreneurs out there. So there you go. She's got a good story to tell. I have another book recommendation. I just finished reading a book called A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki, and it's really, really good. It's it's making me think a lot about time and mortality, I guess. So it's a little deep, but it's extremely well written, and I've really loved it. So, and creativity. There's a lot about creativity and how that works. The creative spark. And yeah, that's just really cool. Sum up of that book, because you won't want to read it if you just know that much. It's this woman and her husband live on an island off the coast of BC. She picks up something on the beach, which is a package with a few things in it. One of it, which is a diary, and it's written by a 16-year-old girl in Japan. And so it's kind of a story within a story, because you read this diary, one chapter, and then the next chapter you go back to Ruth, who's telling the story. It's just really well done. So recommend that one. Has nothing to do with yarn, but it's a great book. All right, well, I think that's good enough for today, and I'm going to try and get this out on the weekend at the latest. And in the meantime, if you enjoyed this episode, please press subscribe, tell a friend, and if you want notifications, press that little bell there beside the subscribe button, and you'll find out when I've got new episodes. All right? Thank you for watching, and happy knitting. Bye-bye.